and it's a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel on a rather wintry Sunday afternoon in Melbourne. And our special guest today is AFLW draft expert Declan Reeve. Many thanks for being on the program today, Declan. And also welcome back to Sarah. Sarah, look, what I might do is throw it to you to cross-examine Declan about the coming draft. We won't let the judge go first, otherwise we'll never hear anything else.
That's all right. I won't grill Declan too much, but I thought we'd start with, especially for our listeners who aren't familiar with the differences between the AFL and AFLW draft, could you run us through a few of the differences and similarities between the two, Declan?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Lovely to be on. I love being invited to things, so this is perfect. Pretty much like the main fundamental difference is that with the AFLW draft, the nomination is different. So you nominate for which zone you want to go into. So it's obviously sort of state-based if you don't live in that state. But if you do, there's sometimes a little bit of, flexibility. So Queensland's a good example with Brisbane and Gold Coast is if you're a girl living in Queensland, you'll be in one of their team's academies. And rather than having to nominate for the whole state, you can nominate for that specific academy, and then only that team can take you.
Well, that's a perfect introduction into a bit of discussion about Charlie Rowbottom as well, who's nominated for Queensland. What did you think about that?
Yeah, that was a massive shock because I think the general consensus so far has been that she would have been Geelong's pick with their first Victorian pick. So obviously shakes a few things up, and you know, it's the first real power move I guess we've seen with a top prospect deciding to nominate a different state. You often see with Western Australia and South Australia is that girls that maybe aren't certainties to go to one of those teams will nominate for a New South Wales or a Queensland or sometimes a Victoria, just depending on what they want to do with their, I guess, outside life of football, given that it's part-time still. But yeah, this is the first time that we've had, you know, a player that was certain to get drafted in their own state and certain to go top two change it. And I think it's a really good standard setter in a way, because we might see in future that if Gold Coast again finish towards the bottom and they don't feel like any of their academy girls are going to fill out those high picks that they have, they might go to, you know, next year, just looking ahead, one of the best girls in the country is Ella Roberts from Western Australia. So they might go to her and say, look, we've been able to do it with Charlie Rowbottom. Why don't you nominate us and we can do the same for you? Or, you know, if GWS finish low and they've got pick one or whatever, they might do the same and say, look how it's worked for Charlie Rowbottom. You can come to New South Wales and really, you know, set yourself up.
Declan,
Yeah, definitely.
Can I just butt in there, Sarah? Declan, can we take it from that Charlie Rowbottom's probably signed a pretty good contract to go to Gold Coast?
I'm not one to speculate. I know that obviously Gold Coast have a pretty good relationship with Bond University, and she's studying a Bachelor of Arts, I think it might be, and I think they have a decent program there. So that might have been sort of, I guess, assisted with it. But I think a lot of it is just, you know, lifestyle and not being overly attached to Victoria. So she was happy to go to Gold Coast, and she'll get a nice little pay packet from NAB going and pick one as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're also seeing another Press Parkis making her way to the draft. How do you think she'll be making a name for herself?
Yeah, Georgie's a star. I think she's probably the closest thing we've seen to a pure natural talent in the girls' space, which is really exciting because we've got more girls like that coming through every year. And, you know, obviously we know that her sister Maddie won an AFLW League Best and Fairest, but, you know, Georgie's already sort of setting breaking the records that Maddie's set. She, in 2019, when she was just 16, she won the TAC Cup Best and Fairest. So that was against girls like Gabby Newton, Georgia Patrikios, Ali McKenzie, Tiana Smith, and we've seen how dominant those girls have been at the next level. So I reckon she'll come in and make an impact straight away, and she'll be a pretty good player from the get-go.
That's amazing. And she's definitely someone that's been up there for who will be potentially one of the top picks. Who do you think clubs will consider with their first pick going ahead?
Yeah, well, we've already touched on Gold Coast with Charlie Rowbottom. I reckon that one's a pretty straightforward one. They've got Tegan Levi in their academy, and her sister is already at the Sun. She's a really good player as well. So I doubt that they don't take Charlie Rowbottom with that pick 1, but if they don't, it'll be for Levi. Geelong have the first Vic pick. They'll take Georgie Prasparkas is the clear best player. But with, I guess, some slight retention issues in the past, they might look local and go with Tess Craven, who's an inside midfielder from the Geelong Falcons. You've got West Coast up next. So the sort of consensus with West Coast, or Western Australia rather, has been that there's 2 standout talents in Amy Franklin and Courtney Rowley. So Rowley's a really talented midfielder. Like, she won the Peel Best and Fairest when she was 15. So, she's just put out consistently good performances from a young age. So if they want to go for a midfield option, they might go there. If they want to go for a tall, then Amy Franklin's sort of an athletic utility along the lines of a Roxy Rowe from Freo. So pretty good player to be compared to. And she actually beat quite a few Fremantle-listed players throughout the year as they played sort of their tall defenders on her in the Waffle W. St Kilda.
She's no relation to Buddy Franklin at all, is she?
No. So that has been a question. I think they actually come from the same area in Western Australia as well. So it would be great if that was the case, but no. But they are, similarly athletic tall forwards. And then so St Kilda next up, they'll look at an inside midfielder. You think so? Prasparkas, Craven. There's a girl from Oakley Chargers, Amanda Ling, who won the NAB League Grand Final Best and Fairest, best on ground. She'll probably be considered around there as well. Richmond probably take sort of one of those 3, or they might look for a tall. In that case, they'd go with sort of Tara Slender, who's from the Bendigo Pioneers, and she can play absolutely everywhere. Fun little fact is that she got the most disposals against Georgie Prasparkas of any player this year. So she has that ability to go into the midfield despite being 175 centimetres. So that's a really good hand to have. Geelong have the next 2 picks, so they'll probably go, a friend or a Stella Reid, who's Oakley Chargers again, outside midfielder. She can play backline, she can play forward, and she's really effective in any position. Then Carlton are up next, and they have back-to-back picks. So I think if you have anyone that drops from that top group, so, like the girls I mentioned, so a friend, Slender, Craven, Ling, they'll snap up one of them, and then they'll probably go with maybe an Annie Lee or a Jade Anthony, who are both Vic country again, and both defenders that are good overhead and have good disposal, just read the game well. And then so you've got a bunch of Victorian clubs in the next few picks. So it's a lot of those same names, some girls from Calder Cannons like Amelia Yassir, who's a midfielder on the shorter side, but she's really classy and can sort of play inside and outside. Talia Gillard, who's probably the best open Victorian ruck prospect. So she's 190 centimetres and she's a December birth. So I know clubs really like the fact that she's still probably got some growth in her. So she could end up 192 and be the tallest player in the league. And then Nike Dojik, who's from GWV Rebels. She's been playing in the NAB League since I think 2018 from memory. So she was 15 then playing. So she's one with a lot of form, and she's been building on that consistently each year. Then you've got Fremantle in the first round, so they'll take whoever of Franklin or Rowley don't go to West Coast. And then, yes, some of the other names to look out for from a Vic point of view would be someone like Aurora Smith, who's a winger from the Murray Bush Rangers, maybe a Poppy Shapp from Geelong as well. Annie Lee, Brooke Vickers, and Eliza James are sort of others to look out for there. Adelaide, being sort of the only club in South Australia, it doesn't matter what order they take the players in. So could be any of Zoe Prowse, who's a ruck from Sturt, Gypsy Sherman, who's a tall forward / midfielder, and Brooke Tonin, who's a defender / midfielder. And then Brisbane will pick from their academy, I guess, in a similar sense to Gold Coast and Adelaide, and they'll take Maggie Harmer, who's a general defender, or Michaela Pauger, who's a bit more of a small forward. And then you've got sort of clubs with picks outside the first round. So Western Bulldogs, I think they'll just sort of take whoever they see is best available. So in the recent Draft Central Phantom draft that we did, that ended up being Annie Lee. So she might be one around there. They might look to their VFLW program, given that that's fairly strong as well. Yeah, and then Melbourne probably aren't going to have to worry too much about their first pick, given they've got a father-daughter, Georgia Campbell, who's probably the best ruck prospect in the Victorian pool. And she can sort of play up either end, given that she's a really good athlete. And Collingwood are probably going to look more towards their VFLW team. So someone like Olivia Marr, maybe, or Matilda Zander, something like that.
No, amazing.
Every team there.
I think you did. And going through some of those names, I'm sure eventually will become household, especially in AFLW fan, areas as well. From some of those girls, who do you think will be your national top 10 at the moment?
So a lot of them that feature high up there are probably in it. So Rowbottom, Prosparkus, Rowley are definitely in. Slender and Friend I have as well. I'd say, Prowse would be up there. I think Nike Dojik I like as well, Jade Anthony. And then probably two more, I guess, obscure ones. So Jess Doyle from the Sydney Swans Academy would be up there. And then I like Georgia Campbell as well, a lot more than I think most other watchers would. I think she'll turn out to be a really good player. She's sort of got it in her to be a big-bodied midfielder in the future.
No, definitely. I'm really looking forward to seeing how some of these girls go in the draft. Anything from you, Mark?
Yeah, you're talking about Georgia Campbell. I'll declare that I'm a Melbourne supporter. Adrian Campbell is the father. And I've got my Terrelgan jacket on today. He originally started with Terrelgan down in the Gippsland League, played 22 games with Footscray, Western Bulldogs, and only 2 games with Melbourne. Interesting that the Western Bulldogs didn't make a play for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's more that. I know in the article on Women's AFL, she sort of said that location, being that she's an eastern suburbs girl and they train in Casey, played a part in it. And maybe, like, if we're honest, Melbourne probably is a bit more of an attractive prospect to play for at the moment as well. But yeah, that was another shock, I guess, along the lines of Rowbottom to a lesser extent, because she's grown up a Western Bulldog supporter as well. So everyone sort of assumed that would be an easy choice.
Is that the first time Casey's actually helped Melbourne, Professor?
Declan, can I just ask you about the season coming into its 6th women's season?
Yep.
We're starting to get an idea now of the way that the women's game is played, and I've always noticed it's a different game. Do I get the impression that and this is borne out by the draft, that the players of the AFL were always going for as midfielders? The impression I get with the AFLW is they're after big position players. Is that sort of becoming a trend, or do you think it is more the way the men play, going for the midfielders?
Yeah, it's sort of a funny one, and that's one thing that's always been a curious point, is there's sort of, in the AFLW, like, different traits are valued higher than would go in the AFL. I don't know, like, it's sort of hard to say. I think just naturally you're getting taller girls that maybe preferred to play netball or basketball or even volleyball in the past that are seeing that there's a pathway in the AFLW now, and you're just getting sort of, taller girls that are more interested in it.
Interesting. And finally, for me, the salary cap. Is that, I think it's around about 500,000. Declan, I'm not totally up with it, which is about 20,000 per player. Is that about right?
Look, I can't say that I know an awful lot around the salary cap. As far as I'm aware, is that it's still in that tier-based system. I could be wrong there, but yeah, from memory, it used to be sort of 2 tier 1 players that got paid you most, and then you sort of had 5, I think, in your tier 2, and then the rest would be tier 3. But again, I'm not really certain on that.
Okay.
Declan, just another quick one from me. There's a fair bit of knowledge that goes into any draft, whether it be AFL or AFLW. How much time have you spent researching so that you could put maybe the best 40 or 50 players together?
Yeah, far too much, if you ask me. No. Through my role with Draft Central, which is how I've sort of gotten into it a bit more, I guess. Like, I've probably watched anywhere between 3 or 4 of the Victorian games live each week that they've been there. And then I admittedly haven't watched as much of the other states, but I do try to watch as much of the WA as I can. They'll stream 1 game a week on YouTube, so that's good to see. And And I was lucky enough to sort of get up to Queensland to watch a couple of the AFLW games as well. And obviously the entire 18 under 19s championships I watched.
So, Declan, how did you start with the AFLW?
I've sort of always had an interest in it through my coaching, given that I sort of coached interleague in the Sandringham region. So I guess I've got that little bit of vested interest, but I sort of I got reached out to by Peter Williams from AFL Draft Central to go and write for them and watch games for them. And from there, I obviously took that because I thought it would be a great opportunity and just run with it, really.
Did you coach women's footy?
Yeah. So I'm currently coaching the under 14 girls at the Bentley Junior Football Club.
Yeah, I think I saw you coach the Bentley women's at one stage, stepping in for someone that was away, I think.
Yeah, when I was a little bit younger, I did that. But decided to go to the juniors just to, I guess, flesh out my knowledge of coaching a bit more.
Oh, good stuff. And you certainly won't go fancy with the AFLW. I think from me, my perspective, my brother and his kids, they certainly love it. And they can name probably more, or they could early on name more women played for the Demons than the men. But I think as it grows, you're going to start seeing a lot more people interested in it and a better understanding of what it is as well. Yeah,
I can't wait. And I sort of look at girls like Charlie Rowbottom, and then there's even more last year. I mentioned Ella Roberts. There's another girl, Montana Ham from the Western Jets. That's one to look out for, that like are these bigger girls, or not bigger, but taller girls that are athletic, can take overhead marks and like absolutely crash packs. And that's sort of the stuff that's going to get people more on board.
Yep.
Declan, if I can give you a what if question, we probably know the answer. It's probably the AFL needs to have a look at it. Why isn't it, and why don't the AFL, and hopefully get a Topia going, have the AFL men's draft and the women's draft held together on the same night in the same venue? Will that ever happen? And if not, why not?
I don't think it would, because in a way they might think that one overshadows the other. So I think giving it its own night where, you've got a specialist team of girls watchers like Sarah Black on the commentary panel for the women's, and then you've got sort of the guys like Cal Toomey for the men's, separating that gives them both equal amount of attention that they deserve in a way.
Right. Because there hasn't, the only reason I say that, when you talk about the men's draft, everyone knows about it. It's in the papers. You hear about it. It was very, very quiet that the fact the women's draft is coming up. Yeah, you don't seem to see it in the popular media. So whether it needs, more generation or something just to get it out there a little bit.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, newspapers and probably the internet as a whole could give it a bit more attention. And we are slowly seeing that. I know I've seen a couple of phantom drafts around it as well, which you can see anywhere between sort of 50 to 100 of those in the boys. And there hasn't been that sort of attention to the girls. But this year I've seen probably like 6 to 10. So, I mean, it's small for the moment, but it'll keep growing.
So you've got a show like Fox Footy that generates everything just about football, and it's just been silent on the women's draft.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But, I absolutely agree. I think it does need a bit more attention.
But Gelding, though, you've got to understand what Fox Footy's mantra is all about, though. Programs that are dominated by sausages, it's just ridiculous. You look at what is it, AFL 360, and the show's when the show is better when Slobocop's not on it. And he wouldn't know much about women's footy at all, even if I don't think he would know that they even play.
As the chief writer for the Herald Sun.
Yep.
Chief football writer.
Yeah. Yes, the chief football writer, not the chief men's football
writer.
Yeah. Anyway, look, Declan, I might get you out on this one. Draft Central, you mentioned, and I picked up the podcast on the quite good podcast you did on the AFLW draft. Where can the people who are watching this program now go to that podcast? Where can they find that?
So it's on Spotify. I hope no one from Draft Central is watching, because I don't actually know if it's on any other podcasting platform. But if you do search up Draft Central, we've got an article where we run through every pick essentially, and each of us, so it was three of us, myself, Peter and Michael. We took different teams and we give a little bit of a summary of why we selected each player and other players that we considered for those picks. And yeah, the link to the podcast is on that, and you can find it through Spotify, the Final Siren podcast.
Yeah, certainly I'd recommend it. Well worthwhile to anybody who's going to watch the draft on Tuesday night, because it'll give you some great information on the players, and it won't be so much of a surprise when somebody gets picked.
Just a quick one, Declan. It's Final Siren podcast, and it's on Apple as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, yeah, it's looks all right. Just looking at the last articles and all that, or the last podcasts, it's last 5 are all AFLW.
Okay. Many thanks, Declan, for joining us today. We'll look forward to some more podcasts from you, and maybe get you on when it gets a little bit closer to the AFLW season.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no worries. Good afternoon. All right, Dan, waiting patiently there. You've maintained your 100% record.
Absolutely. Always go opposite my picks. That's exactly the way it should be. So, working in the sports industry, I'm not supposed to be gambling. So I always, pick opposite of what I pick. But obviously Milwaukee came back and swept the Bucks 4 straight after the Phoenix Suns went 2-0 and were pretty much dominating the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis just put the team on his shoulders, ran away with it. In the end, just had a remarkable, final 4 games, particularly the last game of the series, scored 50 points, becoming just the 7th player in NBA history to have 50 points in the finals. So, I think Jerry West, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Elgin Baylor, the historic names of the NBA, just dominated. 50 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks in the final game.
Dan,
we'll put the bets on for you, Dan. Don't panic.
Sorry, Gelding, I missed that. What'd you say?
We'll put the bets on for you. Just send over US dollars, will you?
Exactly.
Dan, you watched that last game, and I think when we spoke, we called for Giannis probably to be a bit more aggressive. At times he's maybe a little bit passive early on. That last game, it seemed watching it that he was unstoppable. Like, they just had no answer, but did they try anything different to try and limit his impact?
I think they did. I think he just took it upon himself, knew that if they were at home, that it was going to be tough to go back to Phoenix and win a game 7. So sometimes you just get that extra adrenaline, extra motivation to say, we've got to win this one. If we don't win this one, we may not win the series. So I think he just took it upon himself and put it on his shoulders. It's crazy, Cooter, when we were talking about the game last week that was going on, we talked about the fact that fourth quarter may come down to one final bucket, and that's exactly what it did. The alley-oop dunk, that was just a highlight reel for them to win that game 5 and then go back into game 6, and him just dominating. It just shows that he just wanted that series more than anybody else.
And Dan, the presentations are always interesting to watch, and this one certainly didn't fail to deliver. The owners are always interesting, their responses and the way they get presented, because obviously in Australia we don't actually have private ownership of our team, so it's always the coach and the captain or the president, whatever. But their ownership group, they just look like absolute stunned mullets, and then trying to associate with the players and the coaches and that, it was sort of like social distancing for the owners at one stage.
No doubt about it. And I think, obviously if you're an owner in the NBA, you're excited. You just won the championship, and that's exactly what you put a team together to do. But I think they look at it in their heads like, how are we going to do this 2 years in a row? Then you got to look at contracts, and you got to look at signing veterans and how much more money you're going to have to spend to try to make it happen. And when you're a small market team that doesn't have that big budget, that's probably something that was in the back of their head. I think that's why owners are always a little stale. They're always worried about the money, always worried about the risk, things like that. But it was a very unique trophy presentation. I thought it was funny, David, that literally they unfurled a case around the trophy that looked like a trifold locker with two women in masks sitting side by side. I thought I was like at a Las Vegas show with showgirls or something. I don't know what what that presentation was all about, but it just was a little uncomfortable to watch.
I thought pigeons were going to fly out of the Louis Vuitton cases. It was open, but
yeah, David Copperfield, man, all of a sudden the trophy would levitate or something. I didn't know what was going to happen.
I was going to say it's a pretty big success for a small city. There's 500,000 people there, and not too far away from Green Bay. You have to say per capita one of the more successful sporting areas of America, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously with the Packers, with the University of Wisconsin, Badgers up there. Football, basketball is always a Final Four, our CFP contender. Then obviously the NBA being as good as they are, the Milwaukee Brewers in baseball. I mean, they've got it's a fan base that it's small market. It's a big state, small state, with relative population, but absolutely love their sports. So that's one of the benefits they've got up there.
And I think that Giannis is now the most famous Antetokounmpo basketballer getting around. There's not that many that I can think of that have beat him. How long is this guy's career going to go for? And we're going to look at a bit more success for this fellow. He just seems, I don't know, he just seems unbeatable, this bloke.
He doesn't look like the Greeks I know, but there must be something else on the family tree.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously, it's crazy if you guys were looking at the videos of when he got drafted, I think 2014, to the body that he's got now. I mean, you could just see what they do in the NBA to bulk up and get better, get faster, get leaner, all the things that they do. He's in the prime of his career. He's only mid-20s at this point. I mean, LeBron James was signing big contracts at 33, 34 years old. So as long as he doesn't get those, freak injuries, those knee injuries, those type of things, I think he's got another 10 years or so in the NBA.
Dan, that's a genuine issue though, isn't it? The way that he plays with the energy and the all-court game that he's got, for him to play, say, 10 to 15 years, it's going to put a hell of a toll on his body as compared to, say, LeBron James that has that outside game to complement the inside game.
Absolutely. That's why you got to put players around him that can help protect him. Guys that it's not just going to be him day in and day out. You got to get the guys that can shoot from the outside, that can open up the post and be able to feed him and get those wide open versus getting fouled heavy, being thrown to the ground, trying to prevent him from getting into his momentum and getting into his game.
So that being said, Cooper, that being said, then how long will he stay with the Bucks?
Yeah, he set that mentality that he really likes it there, that he's not looking for a super team and super money. I mean, they're obviously going to pay him and take care of him and try to keep them there as long as they can. But I don't think this is a guy that's got that ego that needs to play for the Los Angeles Lakers or the New York Knicks. I mean, I think he's okay in Milwaukee and making it a career there.
And I'm just reading now, he wasn't allowed to leave Greece till he was 18 because they wouldn't give him citizenship being born in Nigeria, I think he was. So he obviously spent a bit of time in Greece, so maybe he is a loyal type from that.
Yeah, and surely he'd make significant money through sponsorship with shoe companies, apparel wearers and things like that, as well as anything else. Like, I think he went to Kentucky Fried and ordered something like 50 nuggets or something.
That was just an entree.
Yeah, to celebrate the win. So I don't think, as you said, I think he might be content to stay at Milwaukee, but will certainly be well looked after, I would have thought, outside of, within basketball, but also outside of basketball.
Reminds me when Troy Aikman, for the Dallas Cowboys, if he had a game and didn't get sacked, he'd take his lineman out for dinner. Cost him about $10,000 because they'd have about 10 ribeye steaks for entree. But if you don't get sacked in the NFL as a quarterback, I'd be funding it as well.
Dan, perhaps a sports star in Wisconsin, not looking for a lot of money and just content to stay where he is. Could they get Giannis to go and talk to Aaron Rodgers?
I was going to say, Mark, it almost sounds like the opposite of the current quarterback at the Green Bay Packers, trying to make more money, trying to get out of Green Bay. So, yeah, it's completely an opposite situation at the moment.
Go on, Coutta.
Sorry. The other one, obviously, with Giannis was that him and Middleton have played together at the Bucks for the 8 years, and they're their two genuine superstars. And then the pieces around them that they put in, it's just amazing the way they put a team together. So obviously during the finals, you had a Bobby Portis Jr. who scored points. You had Forbes that came in and scored a few points here and there. Lopez. It really is amazing the way they put a list together around their two genuine superstars.
No, you're right, Cooter. And I'll tell you, this is, you think about it, just a couple of years ago, the Toronto Raptors, won the NBA championship with, Kawhi Leonard and a team of, that wasn't necessarily the superstars, but they put a lot of good parts around Kawhi. And that's one thing I think is a little bit different. I think everybody kind of felt that Kawhi was going to leave and try to get back to Southern California, where he played his college basketball and where he grew up playing as well. Whereas Giannis isn't obviously going back to the NBA team in Greece. Again, I think he's good where he's at, shows that he can win, and the fans love him up there.
Now, Dan, you're talking about going to big markets. There was a whisper during the week that Chris Paul might be heading to Los Angeles.
Oh.
Yeah, Cooter, that's exactly what I saw when I read that. I'm like, man, are you kidding me? Look what he just did with Phoenix. And again, he's a star in Phoenix right now just because we've got him in the NBA Finals with, a very young team. If he was to stay with Phoenix, they could stay competitive. If not, the Phoenix Suns need to know sooner rather than later with the NBA draft coming up, so they know they need to draft a point guard and that captain of that team. But again, it goes back to that Lakers super team and how much power. I mean, if he's desperate to try to get an NBA championship and trying to do that in Milwaukee, the Miami Heat situation where they had the three players that went down to play in Miami to try to win a championship. I think that's what maybe LeBron and AD are trying to do the same thing, trying to recruit Chris Paul over there to play point guard.
All right, last question, Dan, on this. And we always look to you for a long-term successful prediction. Chances of Milwaukee going back-to-back?
Yeah, this is always the challenge. I think, obviously, you've got to look at the draft. You've got to look at free agency. And I think that's always the challenge, particularly with the Milwaukee. They've got the talent. Can they keep the guys on the team that are on the team right now? Who do they pick up in the draft, which isn't going to be a great draft for them because obviously they won the finals, they won the championship, so they're going to be at the end of the draft pool this year. That's where you want to be when you win a championship. But what happens to free agency? There's a lot of guys out there that are in free agency, and Kawhi Leonard being one of them, that where do they go? Where do they end up? And do they all try to get together with one team and try to form that super team for the Lakers?
Yeah, they're all going to the Knicks, Dan.
Yeah, that's the second team I was going to mention, Mark, but there's just that team has changed.
All right, thanks, Dan. Much appreciated. We'll give NBA a break for a little while now. All right, Paul, round 19 NRL kicked off with more news of NRL players doing the wrong thing, more invitations to women to visit hotel rooms, and then families and players playing pass the parcel on hotel balconies.
Sharing the tucker, sharing the food. Just to be pointed out, though, with the rendezvous, the salubrious NRL news, that was before the whole game pretty much was moved to the state of Queensland. But I can tell you that Queensland Health Minister, her head looked ready to explode when she was talking about these constant breaches. They've done the game a massive favour by allowing the game to continue in the state of Queensland. But for the state of Queensland, even Peter V'landys wouldn't have this game running. But it has to be said, no one's done anything wrong in Queensland, apart from some of the players' families playing, as you say, pass the parcel with the bagel or whatever it was over the balcony. So you'd have to hope that the message has gone through and that the players are keeping their heads in, excuse the pun, and everyone's behaving themselves up there in the tropics, because that's the only way the game can continue. Given the Rabbitohs' form, I'm eyeing off the grand finals on my birthday and likely to be at Brisbane. I'm eyeing off perhaps, I haven't told anyone this yet, a couple of nights in Gold Coast and maybe sneaking up to the game, but we'll have to get to the grand final first. But as it stands, and given Sydney's pandemic woes, it looks like the entire season will be completed in the state of Queensland as long as these idiot players, some of them, keep their heads together.
Just a quick one, Professor. Some breaking news at the moment. A fan of a good fan of the show, Bryson DeChambeau, has just been tested COVID positive and won't be going to the Olympics.
Oh, thanks for that, Kurt. That's a news flash.
There we go. And they've replaced him with another quality individual, Patrick Reed.
He's got some form, Patrick. But I was going to say, breaking news in Rugby League Town is Dale Finucane, who you'd have to call the footballer's footballer. Craig Bellamy will be a very sad man as we speak, because Dale Finucane has just signed a 4-year deal with the rebuilding Sharks. He joins another Storm quality player of the highest order, Nico Hines, and it looks like the Sharks are well in rebuild mode for next year. Dale Finucane, if there's one player that Bellamy could keep, he said it, Dale Finucane, and that's no doubt because he fits the Craig Bellamy ethos of doing everything as well as he can, putting in on every play, and they just don't have the money, the Storm, to keep Dale Finucane, which is a massive loss because he just puts in every game. So it's a shame for the Storm. They have, however, positive news, just achieved a Storm record 15 wins in a row, which, given how close the rugby league competition is, or at least used to be, that is a phenomenal effort to win 15 games. There's a few rough edges showing on the Storm, though, and I certainly wouldn't be rushing out to get the super on them winning the comp, even with the Panthers' issues. My Rabbitohs, I mentioned earlier, a dark horse, but I think another dark horse, which Schooner will like, Professor, is Manly, who it's not just the Turbo brothers who are running amok, it's Dale Cherry Evans playing in career best form. So Manly really dusted up the Tigers. Interestingly, the West Tigers are the subject of a documentary on TV, which is getting quite a lot of people in rugby league town talking. I haven't seen more F-bombs or heard more F-bombs since Rodney Roode was around, Professor, who you'd remember. But every second word seemed to be F, and it was certainly a different method of man management. But he certainly has his heart on the line. It's just his team's pretty shithouse. So I don't know how many viewers will be watching in to watch a car crash of a season for the West Tigers. They're in all sorts of trouble. As are the Warriors. The Rabbitohs put 60 on the Warriors. And it might surprise you, but that's the fourth time in South Sydney history, which is 120-odd years that they've done that. 7 wins in a row for the Rabbits. Very impressive. The Raiders also, I'd had the red pen out, sports fans stand style a while back. They're back, and they're back in the 8, Professor. So that is the comeback story of the year, with a few injuries as well. The Eels are plummeting incredibly fast, probably about the same as our Prime Minister's stocks at the moment. The Eels are really struggling. So we'll see what happens there. The Roosters just keep on winning despite having more men down than Saving Private Ryan. They're just unbelievable, the Roosters, the way they get it done. The Knights had Ponga, but it was nowhere near good enough. So we're seeing there the Roosters, but they just have those player losses that I don't think will allow them to contend this season. The Panthers had a very scratchy win against the Broncos, and you're starting to see what's happening. Now they've lost their general, Nathan Cleary. They just aren't the team they were when I declared they'd win it all. And, of course, Api Coruscant, their hooker, excuse the pun, given his recent indiscretions, he is out for some time. So there's some real issues there at the Panthers, and they need to steady the ship or they're not going to be the premiership favourites for much longer.
Paul, Api Coruscant, where's the consistency in the penalties? If he was playing for West Tigers, I assume he would have got the season and the fine. Because he's playing for Penrith, who are a premiership favourite, he got 2 weeks.
No, well, they have to be careful because this happened before Jai Arrow. So what happened, he was about to have round 3 with this lass, and he called it off, not on the grounds of any dedication to the wife, but because Jai Arrow got caught. So he thought, and this is the one moment of wisdom he's shown in all of this, he'd better not have the rendezvous in Brisbane. If he had have gone ahead with that rendezvous in Brisbane whilst we're in a bubble and they've gone out on a limb to save rugby league, the season would have been declared over because that Queensland Health Minister would have personally driven the players out in a bus over the state border and dumped them over the border quite gladly. So the reason is that they didn't come down harder on him as this happened before the Jai Arrow incident. So that's the only thing that saved the game and him from being sacked for the season.
I'm staggered that that's even a consideration, that he had done it twice knowingly. But anyway.
Yeah, they had to follow because it had happened. If it happened after the Jai Arrow, I think they would have thrown the whole season at him and more. And as I said, there wouldn't be a season because that Queensland Health Minister is ready to just pull the trigger. Now, I wouldn't want to be the one stopping Peter V'landys, but this woman can.
Paul, just one question before we look at today's games. I was watching the Storm game and Remus Smith scored a try. Now, Remus played 5 seasons at Belmore and only managed 49 games, but he's played every game for the Storm, and you would have to say that Storm is one of the teams of the NRL season. How could the people at Belmore have let Smith go?
It's the same as that man at Manly in the centres, Harper, who looks like the Thirsty Merc lead singer with the vintage mo. A bit like yourself there, Professor, with the mo action. He was at the Dogs too, and last night he looked like he had spiders on him. No one wanted to touch him. He just played out of his skin. So there's something wrong at Belmore in talent retention, but who you have signed is Phil Gould. So you would hope that there's going to be a better eye on talent now that Phil Gould is there. You've got Tavita Pangai Jr., who's a big signing, literally, one of the biggest players in the game. Sonny Bill Williams has stepped in to say he'll be his mentor and perhaps show him the Muslim face.
That's the end of him.
We'll see how that goes. Sonny has turned his life around, but yeah, we'll see what happens because Tavita's a bit of a loose cannon. But you'll be okay next year, Professor. You've got quite a team building there. And as I keep saying, if you could get Brandon Smith from the Storm to be your number 9, you'd be an even better team to what is looking like a much better year next year for you.
Paul, on Pangai Jr., so he's now going to the Panthers for the rest of the season, and then we'll go to Canterbury next year. Now, the ability, and I still don't understand how it happens, but rugby league, he can go to a team to strengthen them to win a premiership and then go to another team mid-season. I don't understand it.
Well, if it made sense, it wouldn't be 2021 or rugby league. So what has happened there, there's a short-term gap. He's not playing for the Broncos. It's all about money. The Panthers need a forward of that size. They'll pay his salary for this year, and then next year he gets on the Bulldogs jersey. So it's almost reminds me what Jerry Seinfeld said once, we're actually cheering for laundry. So it's not the person we're cheering for, it's just the jersey. So we'll see how that works. It is a strange concept, I have to say that someone's almost it's like on loan though in the English football system, but that's more for lower level clubs from the Premiership, that the Premiership players loan their clubs out to get them some game time experience. But this the Panthers would be thinking is a win-win, is that they get to plug a hole, but they don't have to have him for years from here when those players that are injured come back. It's more about filling the needs at Penrith. If they win a premiership and he's a part of it, they will look like geniuses.
But, Paul, the loan system and all that, there's a cut-off date. Now, we're currently the 25th of July. What round are we up to?
19. There's only 6 games left to go. So they can't fit him in the cap for next year, the Panthers, and they'll have their returning players that he's been signed to cover. So that's why Canterbury doesn't care if he's playing at Brisbane or Penrith. It doesn't bother to them. They'd probably rather that he's getting game time experience. And the Panthers, as I said, if they can fill a hole with this giant of a man who plays well, they'll look like they're geniuses. But it is allowed. It is a strange concept, but they do allow it.
Going forward, any team could do what they've done to try and win a premiership if they're in the top 8.
If you've had players injured and there's a need, there's a hole there. Yeah. So.
All right, Paul. St George and Gold Coast today at 150.
Well, I surprise you. If we used to be, don't be a nufty back Matt Duffy. Gelding will reach for the pen with this one. David Fafita, his brother, has scored 10 tries in 6 matches. Now, you don't need an abacus to work out that's an average of more than one a game. $2.50 to go over the white line today for feeder up there. So that's David. That's worth a bet. The Titans should win that. The Dragons are a rabble ever since weekend at Vorney's. So I think that the Titans should win that game. They've named a number 6, the Dragons, I've never heard of, Jaden Sullivan. That's because of all these players who were on the tongs at the barbecue serving their suspension. So they've ruined the Dragons' season, and the Titans can actually make the 8. And dare I suggest it, Professor, if they do come home into the 8, could there be a certain Cameron Smith reaching for the boots to finish off his career and help them get deep into the finals? Wouldn't that be something?
All right, and my Bulldogs playing the Sharks at 4:05.
Well, I want to think your Dogs can win it, but the Sharks need to win to make the 8. and Big Andrew Fafita, who's playing to show that he's worth a new contract, is named in the team. He could be the difference, I think. So I'd like to see your boys win, but I think it's going to be high scoring, 32-20 to the Sharks. They need to win to make the 8. There'll be a lot of excitement there about the players coming into the Sharks, and that puts pressure on the players that are there to both defend their roles for this year and hopefully win a contract next year for the incoming coach, Craig Fitzgibbon. I've never heard so much talk about an incoming coach in my life. So he must have something, Craig Fitzgibbon, for a bloke that never speaks. He must, I've never heard him speak much. He must have something, because everyone's always on about what he's about to do at the Sharks.
Okay,
he may be a great PowerPoint presentator.
Yeah, well, he doesn't say much at all. So neither does Wayne Bennett, though. You have to be said a bit more lately. But I did like that Wayne Bennett, we scored 60 points, which is about scoring like 200 in our AFL. And he said, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I actually like that because it shows he's a bit worried about the defensive lapses of the Rabbitohs. This is the master coach. And if you want to talk swimming, it's appropriate today. He will have us Rabbitohs tapered right at the perfect time of the season. So let's see what happens. I'm getting a little bit excited.
All right. Thanks for that, Paul. Dan, the Cleveland Indians yesterday announced that they were becoming the Cleveland Guardians, thereby removing another Indigenous Native American team from sporting teams. It leaves the Braves out on their own in baseball. Did it take anybody by surprise, or has it been coming for a while?
Yeah, it's been coming for a while. I mean, the Cleveland baseball team announced in December 2020 that it was going to get rid of the Indians nickname because it had been increasingly divisive. I mean, the franchise has gone by the name Indians since 1915, but sports franchises here in the U.S. are increasingly under criticism for using names, logos, and uniform designs, elements that reference Native Americans. So there was no surprise that they were going to change the name. Strangely enough, though, when I heard the name, it wasn't based upon a Marvel movie, Guardians of the Galaxy. The new identity actually comes from statues near the baseball field named the Guardians of Traffic, interestingly enough, which are iconic to the Cleveland area. They're 43-foot high statues that have stood on the Hope Memorial Bridge for almost 100 years, and you could see them from Progressive Field, which is the baseball field that Cleveland plays in. The Guardians of Traffic, they're meant to symbolize the spirit of progress, and that lines up with dropping the name that has been deemed offensive. So strangely enough, that's the direction they go, is based upon statues on a bridge that have overseen the ballpark.
Dan, that was part of a competition that had 1,200 shortlisted names, and that was the best name they could come up with. 2 monolithic statues on a road. That has just got mud written all over it, and I just wonder whether the fans will embrace it.
It's got to be the first world sports team named after a traffic cop, surely.
Well, and interestingly, Judge, I mean, the statement from the ball club was, through the research, the baseball club identified a few key themes that were important to the fans, is what they were saying, which was connect to the city of Cleveland, honor their rich baseball history, which I'm not sure of the rich baseball history, and unite their community. And they believe Guardians upholds all 3 of those pillars. So based upon the research, that's what led them to the Cleveland Guardians.
I think the rugby league players probably need some Guardians up there. Has to kick them in their bubble and out of the nightclubs, but that's a different topic. I tell you what.
Dan, do you think this would have an impact on the Major League franchise, the movie franchise now that...
Beautiful. That was what I was going to ask. They're making apparently a 4th one.
Well, you know,
you can't have the Indians in 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, does it become a movie theme? Does it become a storyline that if they win, then they change the name of the team or something like that? But it is really interesting. I mean, the Guardians end with the same IANS that the Indians do. So the road uniforms will stay Cleveland across the front of the jersey. You know, if you look at the uniforms quick, if they keep the same iconic style, you know, it's Guardians and Indians. So, you know, when you look at it quick, it may not seem like much of a difference until you obviously look at the name a little bit closer.
Now Dan, what caught my eye particularly was the short feature that was produced, announced by Tom Hanks. Now, when you get Tom Hanks to announce a name change, It adds a little bit of gravitas, doesn't it?
Oh,
Did you like the way I whipped that in?
Yeah, I'm waiting
Does it come with a
for
six-pack and a lanyard?
Dalligan's been pretty good about the pop culture references. I think with As Many Lives as Private Ryan and Seinfeld. So I'm waiting for him to pop one on the Tom Hanks reference there, Professor. But yeah, it definitely, whenever you unveil something this big, to have some celebrities or some people that are closely have interest or inherited interest in the name, it definitely helps fans like, oh, hey, Tom Hanks thinks it's good, then it must be good. You know, that type of attitude.
Well, didn't they get Lou Brown from Major League or one of those sort of characters really to sort of roll it out? Who was the female owner? Rachel Phelps? Was it Phelps or the like?
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think it would have been iconic, Coutta, to have Charlie Sheen on there and talk about how this is winning. The Guardians are winning. You know, going back to his phrases years ago that he got in trouble with.
And while
Tom Hanks is the actor who made talking to a volleyball for 2 hours look entertaining, so he's got the skills.
Yeah, Wilson. Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, given that Cleveland's changed its name, the Washington football team have been looking at changing their name for a considerable period of time now, but have yet to announce anything, and they're still the Washington football team. What's the story with that?
I think they're just trying to find the right name, Mark. There's so many different options. I'm sure politics are playing a role in it. And I've seen even some political names that have been thrown out there, like the Washington Congress being one
Washington
of those.
Senators.
Yeah, I mean, the Senators. Yeah, I mean, it's not very motivating, particularly in this politically heated climate. So that may be what they're trying to figure out. Maybe they've already got a name in the background that's politically affiliated, and they just want to see if the political rhetoric here dies down a little bit before they announce it. But obviously, there's plenty of animals and things that they could name their team after in that respect. I mean, if they want to do something similar to what Cleveland did with the IANS and keep skins in the name, maybe it's the Washington Potato Skins or something like that could be part of the nickname. So who knows where they're heading, but they must not have found the right name yet to unveil.
I've got a good one, Dan. The Washington Swamp Rats.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad one. As what was Trump's thing, drain the swamp? I'm sure that would go over well too in the political rhetoric there, Mark.
Thanks for that.
Professor, just a quick one. Just with the Olympics at the moment, is Liz Cambage a big name in American sport, Dan, or in America? Is it known who she is or anything like that? Who'd
you say, David?
Yeah, Liz Cambage.
That was my answer. It's like, who was that?
Yeah, no, it's all right. Just wondered. That's all. Just this week, with Liz, we've just seen her have some issues. So, yeah, just wondered.
Yep.
No, not big, I would have thought, Coutta. All right, Judge, during the week, you sent me an email regarding tennis, Margaret Court and women playing 3 sets. Would you like to elaborate so the panel can talk to you about that?
Just a couple of controversial issues. I think Coutta and Sarah, you might be interested in. Margaret Court's a very polarising figure, and let me just say straight from the outset, I can't stand her theories on most things, and particularly her disgusting views on, she's a homophobe, pure and simple, and she's just a repeat offender. However, I would argue that she is the best female, if not best, tennis player of all time. And I'll also argue that she's a feminist icon. Now, that would make most feminists just about drown in their porridge, even hearing that. But I just want to, just quickly on the Serena Williams, for instance, who's the greatest competitor. Serena Williams has been playing now for 26 years. Margaret Court for 18. Serena has won 23 Grand Slam singles, 14 doubles, a total of 37 Grand Slam. Margaret Court won 64 Grand Slam titles. Serena Williams has won 73 singles titles. Margaret Court won 192. Margaret Court won $2 million in her career, which is worth about $20 million now. Serena's won $94 million. I don't think there's any argument that Margaret Court is the greatest tennis player of all time. I don't use the word greatest very often, but in her case, you only go by statistics, you only go by she beat who was available at the time, and it's just she'll never be beaten. The feminist icon is one that many women would find hard to swallow, but she was a trailblazer at a time when it was a very male-dominated industry. Clearly, they were paid peanuts. They had a hell of a time, not just herself, but Billie Jean King, Yvonne Goolagong, and the like, even Chrissy Evert in the later days, in just getting their game seen, played, and have a proper tour. And women like Serena owe their careers, I would argue, to women like Margaret Court. Not only were they great trailblazers for their game, they were very supportive of each other. When Margaret Court was going to retire early, she was brought back to play by Billie Jean King and Yvonne Goolagong. She's very supportive of Yvonne's career. She was a working woman, a working mother. She won Wimbledon 3 times, won 3 majors after coming back from having children. And I just think if you look at her career and her single-minded dedication towards what was a very unpopular sport at the time, particularly compared to the men's game, that you could only call her a female icon. Now, Billie Jean King is well regarded as such. It just seems to me that Margaret Court doesn't get that honour. And in fact, there's a lot of talk about Margaret Court Arena being renamed. I repeat, I can't stand her political and personal views, but that's not why the Margaret Court Arena is called that. It's because she was a dominant female tennis player, and I think can be categorised as a female icon. Sarah, what do you think about that?
Well, it's a very heavy topic that you brought up, but I think we're on very similar pages when it comes to Margaret's achievements in tennis. Everyone else pales in comparison. And while I think we can agree the majority of people these days would disagree with the majority of her beliefs and especially how she's gone about them, it's her achievements is why she's become a recipient, or she's had this stadium named after her. If we went through and we renamed everything that might be named after someone who was homophobic or racist or sexist, anything like that, we'd be going back years. Like, you can assume the Prime Minister that Melbourne was named after was probably a massive homophobe as well, because that was just the day and time. Do we go through and then rename Melbourne as well and go through that? Whereas we think about it, it was named Melbourne for a reason. It was named Margaret Court Arena for a reason. And it wasn't because of her political beliefs. It was because of her achievements in tennis. And I think that should probably be the main focus that I think people need to have a look at a bit more, and realise that just by having this stadium doesn't mean we're excluding anyone in particular, but we're recognising someone's achievements.
Sarah,
the King, Wally Lewis, had an affair with his wife. If they try and remove that statue outside the Gabba, there'll be a riot. So and you can't start ripping everything down.
And let's not forget Dean Jones was Father of the Year too. So
we once researched and found
Gelding. That's a big one, Coutta.
Gelding, you've just set up.
Oh, when you hear something like that, that's funny. That is funny.
Can we just congratulate the Australian?
Can we rename the multi-bridge?
Sarah, interestingly, we did some research once, and there are 7 stadia around the world named after murderous dictators, and they still keep their name. So if you're going to start with the Margaret Court, there's a lot more that's got to go down. Coutta, what do you think?
Harold Holt swimming pool could be a starting point. We've just won gold too. It's a gold rush at the Olympics too, Professor. We're just lighting up the pool.
World record as well for the ladies.
Did Thorpe get out of heartbeat of 50 then or not? He's still a bit low.
He's not as inspiring. Where's Bruce McAvaney? Can I ask again? Is he?
He's there, but I think he's doing other sport. I think he's preparing for the athletics.
He'd be more pumped up than a jumping castle about this. Why isn't he on there?
Well, I think they're saving him. It's his last Olympics, Bruce. But good to see the women dominating in the pool. The girl that Emma McEwen did swim in the heat before, Paul and you and I were messaging about this, that there was some disappointment that she actually came second in the semi-final. Some genuine disappointment, even though she gets through to the final. But anyway, Margaret Court, yep, her stats speak for herself, no doubt whatsoever. Has she become a bit of a dickhead lately? Yeah, but that doesn't detract from what she did on the court. And at the end of the day, do we really want to give people like her a mouthpiece to talk about other things other than sport? Like I thought the Olympics the other night, and I know that not everyone will agree, but the use of the Aboriginal flag, they displayed the Aboriginal flag after the national anthem, I thought was brilliant. And that was because some of the girls made the decision to do it when they did the kneel. So, yeah, just Margaret Court, yeah, unbelievable player, but let's just admit she's a dickhead.
Just on that, how can you let politics and sport, plenty of people have used sport over time to run political agendas and stop that. So, yeah, even though I don't agree with what she says, you're never going to stop people bringing politics into sport.
Mel Meninga tried to go the other way.
Coutta, it's good now that John Coates is kept out of politics. What do you say to the Queensland Premier of the day? You will come to the Olympics. You will be a good girl, and you'll do what I tell you to do. Rather than an extraordinary situation, I thought that.
Now, we need to talk about this because John Coates is paid by us. Let's start off with that. He's paid by us. He did take a 20% reduction pay cut over the last 4 years, and he's now down at $450,000 a year. And
freebies. What is he cut his freebies?
Plus a seat on the gravy train that gets you entitlements to anything. Now, that was disgusting. It was embarrassing. It was patronising. Anastasia, she's got issues dealing with in Australia, right? And to have this twat,
because he's got the most powerful lanyard in the room, you know.
Yeah. But I thought it was just disgusting, and really his apology after it, like, he didn't admit he did the wrong thing for starters, and it's like, really, like, are you and Scott Morrison the same person? You can't say the word like the Fonz could never say sorry. Like, Jesus, he's a like.
He said they drank all night and everything was fine. I thought that was a bit unusual, but
in his
hopefully
hotel
no
room,
bubbles breached. But, yeah.
In his hotel room, Paul, they drank till the wee hours of the morning just to smooth over the cracks and the like.
Sarah,
show off their lanyards.
Sarah, did you see that exchange between John Coates and the Queensland Premier?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
Okay. Well,
I might have to get it for you, Sarah, because your input into this would be is quite important.
John,
Coutta, finally, I think women should be playing 5 sets in Grand Slams now. There's now no argument for there may have been an argument in the old days when women were considered the weaker sex and the fairer sex. Equal pay, which they are now, surely women should be playing 5 sets in Grand Slams.
I don't agree with that. I just think it's what it is. Keep playing the 3 sets, and I think if you looked at Wimbledon, 3 sets, and the girls are knackered. Like, they're actually cooked at the end of the 3 sets. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with the 3 sets. Maybe I'm just a bit different, but I think that if you look at the world number 1, at the end of a tournament, it's 7 matches that she's played. Yeah, she was coming off an injury, but could you imagine Serena? Use Serena as an example. Serena would never play 5 sets in her life, or could.
No. Well,
just because the movie goes for 2 hours and not 1.5 hours doesn't make it a better spectacle.
I think we've talked about it for a long, long time. If they want to demand equal pay, why shouldn't the conditions of the game be equal?
Sarah?
It's a good question to, I guess, put to the Women's Tennis Association as well, because I think it was the Australian Open that said they were going to have 5 sets for the women's tennis, I think in the 90s. And they didn't consult the WTA, and then the WTA weren't happy about it, and there was a bit of back and forth, and I don't think it ended up happening. But it seems to be now that we can talk about in any sport. If the women can't do it now, and then we say they're playing 3 rounds now, if they want to play 5 sets, they just have to train their bodies to get there, because at the moment they're putting all their energy into 3 sets. It's the same thing if we were playing a 4-quarter game of footy and you said, no, you're going to have to add a 5th quarter. They're just going to have to train their bodies to be able to last for that 5th quarter. I think if it's something that the WTA want, they're probably the experts on how this should work. If they want that 5 sets of tennis, then the female tennis players would have to just adapt and practice, get into the mindset of having 5 sets ahead of them. But it seems that they need the 5 sets of tennis to win that equality battle, because it'll always be something that female tennis players will have kind of thrown back at them as an argument. And it seems that female athletes, especially tennis players, are constantly being forced to defend their abilities and their worth, particularly on some of the sport's biggest stages. So while it's, I think, something that the Women's Tennis Association have to go out to their players and see what they want, but I can't see why they wouldn't want to play those 5 sets and demonstrate the fact that they can just be up on that stage as long as the men can.
Going back to Couta's question, Coutta, can you name other sports where women have different rules to men's? Like, you know, the golf is still, okay, the tee's a bit different. That's about all, but it's 18 holes, 4 rounds. Horse racing, football,
soccer.
They're all. Is there any other sport like squash? I think is the same as the men's rules. Is there any other sport apart from tennis? And going back to Sarah's point, the Women's Tennis Association, I think, was set up by players, so they have a big influence on that. But I can't think of any other sport where there's a significant difference in the rules.
AFLW.
Yeah, AFLW have different size balls for the female players and different lengths in game time as well.
Different rules.
Coutta,
Yeah.
what it's worth, Coutta, my real argument is that the men's tennis in Grand Slam should be 3 sets. I actually think the modern young supporter these days finds 5 sets actually too long. Look around the world. Where else is the game getting longer? It's actually getting shorter. And look at cricket. Look at whatever sports you like. It's not getting longer. And the attention span. It's only Grand Slams that this ever happens. And Davis Cup. Well, that's about to change. In fact, I think it already has changed. It's only the Grand Slams where they play the 5 sets. And I think it's getting too long for the modern attention span.
Attention spans are shorter than ever. And the other thing that people are realising is that 20, 30 years ago, you had the one screen and you'd watch the match and you'd focus on the match, maybe talk to a few mates that were watching it with you. Now, sports supporters are usually having more than one device in front of them as well. I know if I'm watching the footy, I'll be watching the game and I'll have some stats up on my phone. Maybe another mate will have a different game up on his phone. We'll be looking at that. But there's so many different screens now, so many different things pulling our attention. And it is true that our attention spans are shorter than ever.
Wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. The other thing I think, if we look at it, is that does 5 sets get the best performance out of players as well? If you look at AFL as an example, players used to stay on the ground unless they were either injured or they used to get dragged. But they never ever came off because the sports scientists held a sign up to say, number 24, you're coming off. And the other thing with that is that they sprint harder to get off the ground than they sprint during the game. But 5 sets in Davis Cup, I think, should have stayed. Let's be honest, because that is still one of the greatest tennis tournaments or events every year. The Olympics, as an example, John, I think is 3 sets, but I think the 3rd set in the doubles is a match tiebreaker. Which for me, it's like, Okay, no
I
problem.
think it's a wise going, Coutta. That's what I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for raising that, John. Gelding, we'll come to you. Today's selections at Sale and Warracknabeal to finish up.
Yeah, Professor, just quickly. The first one that we had, I think we gave you Granny's Award, ran second in race 4, just got beaten. But if we go to race 8 at Sale today, number 4, Star Innes, D. Thornton to ride for Ellerton and Zara. We'll then go to race 8. Race 9, number 11, Verskoska, again ridden by Damien Thornton for Cindy Alderson at Cranbourne. And of course, we'll go for one of the Giraffes' favourite in race 10, number 5, Worsfold. So there's some, and maybe at Warracknabeal, Professor, race 5, number 1, Chadston.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Gelding.
And make sure you get your punning's worth today, Professor, because there is no races for five days, which was another subject that we can talk about at a later date.
Gelding, it's okay though. South Australia has racing every day, so we're safe as houses.
Okay, that's good to see.
Gelding, a tough day yesterday. Were all horses given their chance to win yesterday, Gelding?
As we talk about race buys, you had to nothing led, anything that led, you were just gone. You had no chance of winning. If you weren't coming down the middle of the track, coming from the rear of the field, as Mark likes to call them, the swoopers, it was the prime position yesterday. And if you weren't in that position, you just weren't winning.
And
so, again, we were thinking it was going to be an absolute washout, the meeting, with rain and thunder and wind. Didn't arrive. So the track had lanes in it, which is not good for racing.
And is Damien Oliver severely out of form, or just struggling at the moment with some of the rides he's been given?
We talked about it yesterday morning on That's Racing. Damien Oliver had a winner yesterday, and that was his first win for 17 rides, when he rode one at Sandown midweek a couple of weeks ago. And before that, he was 28 without a ride. So you can talk about his last 40, 45 rides, he's had 2 winners. So this is a gentleman that is a champion jockey, has been around for ages, gets the best rides from the best stables, but has a winning strike rate of close to 1 in 10 at the moment. But
what's Jamie Carr at? She's at about 5%, isn't she, for all the carry-on?
Damien Lane and Jamie Carr are around about the 5%. And Craig Williams and Damien Oliver, again, top jockeys, around about the 10%. So something just to look at and to consider. You know, some jockeys hit form, others don't.
Thanks for that, Gelding. Before we finalise the show, Dan, wearing the new polo with the new logo on. If give everybody a look at the big wet.
Cool.
So the Guardians weren't the only people to release a new logo. 100% acceptance rate, Dan?
So far, so good. Yeah, we've gotten, it's always one of those things when you send out a new brand, you never know how it's going to be interpreted. As we try to prepare staff to, social media is generally going to be negative whenever you release a logo, similar with Guardians or anybody else that's out there. Somebody's going to hate it, but it's so far so good. We seem to be very, very positive, very similar to what the Cleveland Indians Guardians did. We did a lot of research since November, interviewed a lot of 2,200 plus student athletes, coaches, administrators, presidents, chancellors, on down the list, fans, season ticket holders, and ultimately came up with a new logo. So we're pretty excited about it. Called the Flying BW. So one way it's B, another way it's W, and we just kind of tilted it to create the Flying BW. So excited about it.
And the Facebook and LinkedIn promos, Dan, were very slick. So well done to your team behind it. I think it was very simple but very effective.
And ours are obviously on the way, are they, Dan? Post this to the Sportsfan Radio's Only on the way, are they?
Are you on the Caulfield committee?
All right, lady and gentlemen, thanks very much for your participation today. Great show. And we'll see you all again very soon. Very